Okay, Year 11, this is to help some of you with your revision. So those of you that are have a target grade, perhaps around about a 4, I'm going to keep this quite simple, quite straightforward. And then perhaps another time I can do one with grades that are a little bit higher, perhaps 5 to 9. So this perhaps goes up to around about grade 4, but it's useful for anyone as a quick fire sort of basic revision starter. So I'm going to be using the revision guide. Some of you have the revision cards, the flash cards that I've done, and they are just for paper 1. So paper 1 and the flashcards were just one idea of one different way of revising, and this is a different way again for paper 2. So it's going to help you read through the revision guide. You can read it. I'm going to ask you some questions. You can pause it, you can find the answers, or just listen on and I'll help explain some of those answers, keeping it quite short and sweet. I'm going to do 3 separate ones. So this is the first one, which is section A, urban issues and challenges. Then the section B, which is the changing economic world. Then the section C, which is the challenge of resource management. Remember, all this is just for paper 2. Okay, so I'm going to start then on urban issues and challenges. So first of all, what is urbanisation? That's a basic keyword, perhaps 1 marker, and you need to know the definition. So urbanisation is when the number of people living in urban areas is growing rapidly, and there's more people living in urban areas in cities than in the countryside. Okay, so where is this happening? What kinds of countries is urbanisation happening quicker? Where is urbanisation slowing right down? Okay, so urbanisation is happening fastest in LICs, in poorer countries. And then we perhaps need to think about some reasons why. So urbanisation happened in HICS in the UK, for example, many years ago. So we've already gone through that process. So in the UK, our cities grew perhaps around about the time of the Industrial Revolution. People moved for jobs in factories, etc. And so our cities have really kind of reached that maximum capacity, although there's issues that we'll look at later on about that. So as countries are getting richer, so LICs, NEEs, newly industrialised economies, low income economies, they are now beginning to industrialise. So what are the causes of urbanisation? So why do people move to cities? So if we think about LICs and NEEs, why would people want to move to live in urban areas? Okay, so the main cause then is rural to urban migration. So why would people leave the rural areas, the countryside? What's pushing them away from the rural areas? Why are people moving to live in the city? So what are the pull factors that's really pulling them to the city? So push factors perhaps might include natural hazards. So earthquakes, volcanoes, drought is a really good example because there'll be lots to write about that. Drought where you can't grow crops. So we've got starvation, famine. Life is just difficult. We've got desertification again. So drought, desertification, where land's turning to desert, really difficult to grow crops in. Conflict and war. So all these are the bad things pushing people away. What's attracting them to the city? So perhaps we've got that dream, the bright lights, the dream of a better life. The city is going to give them the education, the healthcare, better houses, that feeling of safety. So all those positive things are the things pulling people in. Urbanisation is also caused by natural increase. So we'd need to know the definition of what natural increase meant. So natural increase is that people living in the urban areas in LICs and NEEs perhaps have a higher birth rate. So as their health increases and improves, death rate will be a lot lower as well. So you have that difference between higher birth rate, people living longer, so the population is going to increase there. Then we've got the question about megacities. So what's a megacity? So as urban areas grow, they grow so much that they become a megacity. We need to perhaps know some examples of some megacities. So a megacity is when the urban area has over 10 million people living in it. So for example, Mumbai in India. There are 34 megacities in the world, and 2/3 of those are in licks and knees. Okay. Opportunities and challenges. So remember, for lots of our case studies, whether it was Rio, Nigeria, Birmingham, we're always looking at opportunities and challenges. So as cities grow, there are the creation of opportunities, but also challenges. So let's look at the opportunities. So can you think, as cities grow in licks or knees, what opportunities are there for people? So what are the good things there for people? So similar to the pull factors. So the social opportunities, social for people, the opportunities are employment, better jobs, learning skills for better jobs. That's going to improve their life chances, which is going to improve things for their family. They can afford perhaps to send children to schools, you've got better education and healthcare. Also basic things like resources, water, power, electricity. Economic opportunities then, perhaps we've mentioned some of those because socioeconomics are very much tied in together. So for money. So as people move to a city, the city can grow economically. So it's not just the jobs, it's then those jobs, as the businesses begin to grow, it attracts further businesses. So more jobs for more people, more skills. So economic opportunities is about the growth of the economy, more businesses. Industries then that will, where you're making things, where you can sell things internationally. So we've got trade, imports and exports. What about the challenges then? So what problems can you think, can you remember because of urbanisation? Okay, so problems, challenges. We've got social and economic challenges and environmental challenges. So what problems are there for people in the economy? So this is where we look then at squatter settlements, favelas, shanty towns. This is when we looked at Rio. So problems, challenges then are often when people arrive in the city, they perhaps struggle with language, they haven't got the education or the skills, they can't get this dream life that they thought that they were going to have. So instead of being able to afford this lovely house in a lovely area, then migrants into the city are forced to live on the outside of the city. So it's often the richer people in the middle, in licks and knees, and then on the edge of the city are the shanty towns. Maybe sometimes these are areas that are settled on illegally, they shouldn't be there, so therefore they're ignored by the government. The conditions are quite poor. They're badly built. They're built by the people themselves with really bad materials, overcrowded, don't have access to water and power. So the conditions are really quite poor, and then that's obviously impacting on people's mental health and physical health as well. We've got environmental challenges. Rubbish can't be collected because it's perhaps ignored by the government, overcrowded with people. There's lots of rubbish that's not then being collected. The governments perhaps aren't as organised as ours to arrange the regular collection of rubbish. So huge piles of rubbish get built up on the edges of these cities. Air pollution's bad. People are cooking on stoves maybe with made out of wood, or really bad, poor quality oil. So the air is filled full of pollution. That's obviously affecting people's lungs and breathing. Sewage isn't disposed of. The factories aren't disposing of their waste, and it's often through open drains and open sewers through these shanty towns. Okay. We've got the example then we did in Rio de Janeiro. So we've talked about Rochina as the largest favela in Rio, and all those social, economic and environmental opportunities and challenges would very much apply to Rochina, the largest favela in Rio. Then we looked at the Favela Barrio project. So it's really good idea if you can just remember a couple of these names. So what was the Favela Barrio project? What can we remember about Rio and the Olympics effect and the different areas around there? So what did they do to improve these areas? So the Favela Barrio project was an example of an area that was being improved. And they did this in a couple of ways. One was the people themselves were very keen to improve the area. So actually lots of local people got together and arranged the collection of rubbish. That was brilliant because that's local people getting involved. Then the government set up some self-help schemes. So this was organised by the government and an example really of bottom-up help, where the people within the favelas were given funding and money to help improve things for themselves, to help build better houses, improve education. And they knew their best place to decide where that money should be spent. Now the problem is, the money was given, but actually they're not builders, they're not educators. So although this is a really, really good idea, they found it difficult to implement these improvements completely. So the social improvements, economic improvements and environmental improvements then. So social improvements that were made in the Favela Barrio area was money invested into schools, into education, actually getting the local people into schools to help with that. So as teaching assistants, training up local people to help look after children and families, allowing parents to go out to work, participate in the formal economy where they're paying taxes, whereas before very much in the informal economy where they've got great businesses in the local area going, hairdressing, selling food, cafes, wonderful community spirit, but it's informal. They're not paying taxes, so that money is then missing to be able to reinvest into these local areas. Other social ones about health, they put medical kits in different parts of the favelas, and certainly in the Favela Barrio project, so people can learn to test their own blood pressure. They've got access to first aid and medical equipment if they need it, so they can respond much quicker. Economic improvements, that's about helping people to be more economically independent. They could build their own home, buy their own home, so they're looking after it more incentive to look after it if they've bought it, or bought the land that they can then use to make money from. And environmental improvements, where they've put in running water, improved access to power, improved the fuel, electricity for people. So all of these means they're burning less of that poor quality oil. The sewage system has gone underground, and they've improved access to clean running water for people. Okay, so that was our case study we did in Rio de Janeiro. Then the other case study you did was on your own, and that was the case study of Nigeria. Okay, so let me ask you some questions then about Nigeria. So, lick or ni? So Nigeria was our case study of a newly industrialising economy. And ni? Capital of Nigeria is Lagos. And it'd be really useful if you could just remember a few facts and figures about Lagos. So lots of the social opportunities and economic opportunities are exactly that we've just mentioned earlier on. So if you can remember things generally, then you can apply that knowledge, the general knowledge, to Rio and to Nigeria. So that's a time-saving tip. And if you can just remember perhaps one or two of these extra bits then. So, what percentage of the population in Lagos have secondary school education? Okay, so that's about 68% now. So that's a great opportunity. That's why people are moving to Lagos, that better chance to have an education. An economic opportunity. Let's see if there's any facts and figures there. So, for example, jobs have been Eco-Atlantic is the example of a business that's set up there, which is building and construction. So really valuable, transferable skills. If you can learn with this big company, Eco-Atlantic, learn some skills, then you can transfer those skills to other businesses should you wish to change your job. We've got Nollywood. So what was Nollywood? Can you remember? So in Lagos, this has a thriving film industry. So it sounds like Bollywood, but because it's in Nigeria, it's Nollywood. So film and music industry was really, really big. Some of the problems then in Lagos. How many people live in slums, those poor areas? Favelas in Rio, slums and shanty towns in Lagos, in the capital. 60% of people live in slums. How many people or households have to share toilets? So communal toilets are shared by about 15 households. So that's a problem then. Health problem, social problem, collecting sewage and waste. Environmental challenges. Only 40% of the rubbish is actually collected. Traffic congestion. 2-hour commutes into the city because the roads are poorly designed. Public transport hasn't been organised and arranged. And then economic challenges. That's just about the formal versus the informal economy. So there aren't enough formal jobs for people when they move to the city. So they're often then doing scavenging, rummaging around on the rubbish dumps, looking for items that they can recycle, sell, so plastic waste, for example. Computer technology, they can take the computers apart, use really dangerous chemicals and things to remove the precious minerals in there to be able to sell. So that's all part of the informal economy. Okay, moving to the UK. UK cities, so we did generally UK cities, and then we looked at Birmingham, so UK cities. Where in the UK is sparsely populated? So sparsely populated means not many people live there, so the Scottish Highlands, for example. Somewhere that's densely populated, where do most people live? So we've got the southeast cities, particularly around London and Birmingham, so just to name two examples. Then we've got the issues of having areas that are sparsely populated. We've got people that are leaving parts of Scotland, so the Outer Hebrides, for example, is where we looked at. If lots of young people are leaving these areas, that's having problems for the people that are left behind. Often young people are leaving. The people that are left behind then are struggling, perhaps they're older people, they're retired, so there's not that vibrancy, there's not new input into the economy. So houses, homes, roads, lots of things will then deteriorate. Areas that are receiving people, so perhaps around Bristol, the southwest, lots of people are attracted there, it's warmer down south. You've got really good access, so the lots of motorways, public transport, trains, so people are attracted there, and new young people working, lots of money, spending that money in restaurants, cinemas, theatres, so you've got a really great economy then, so as people are attracted to these areas. So perhaps you've got the brain drain as people are leaving rural areas. And then we've got young communities living in urban areas. So cities. So cities have different zones. So what would you call the city centre? So the CBD, the Central Business District. That's where you're going to have banks, offices, insurance, entertainment. So we think of Birmingham, we're thinking of the Symphony Hall, the National Indoor Arena. We've got think tank, museums, we've got the Sea Life Centre, shopping at the Bullring, great transport, we've got Moore Street Station, we've got the new Street Station, Grand Central, restaurants, brilliant. Okay, so that's the CBD. Then as we move out of the CBD, we're coming then to the inner city. So the inner city is the area that was, housing area that was one of the first developed. So if we just stick with Birmingham, so we've got the CBD, the inner city, so somewhere like Spark Hill, really close, traditional terraced houses, so lots of people can squeeze into such a small area. It's often a place where migrants are attracted to because the houses are cheaper. Then we move out to the suburbs, so we've got Hall Green, for example. Semi-detached houses, a bit more space. We've got perhaps more greenery down at Sarehole Mill, for example. Moving out to Shirley, houses bigger still. More open space, Shirley Park. And then we've got the rural urban fringe. So all the way through down the other end of Shirley, we've got business parks. We've got the big Tesco's and Knockcuts, the Blythe Valley Business Park there. Beautiful place to work for business and science parks. Good access, M42, M5, M40 down to London, so really, really good access. So they're the different zones. We've got CBD, Central Business District, inner city, suburbs, then the rural urban fringe. And there's issues in each one of those areas. So urban change. So when did our cities begin to grow? So it was around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Factories, we know around Digbeth, the custard factory that we went to look at, that grew. Jobs factory, Birmingham was brilliantly placed for that. Near the Black Country where our raw materials come from, the coal was moved in along the canals to be burnt in our factories to provide factories with power. Then as time moved on, so what saw the decline of these areas? Why did they begin to become derelict? Why were the factories closing? So that's competition from abroad that actually became so expensive for places like Birmingham, places generally within the UK, to make things that our factories began to close. We were making them, factories will then relocate abroad where labour is cheaper, etc. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. So Birmingham, then the inner city areas began to decline because those jobs weren't there anymore. People were unemployed. They needed different skills. Their houses and the inner city areas began to decline as unemployment increased. So what we saw then, as they declined, we saw an increase in unemployment and things needed to change. Okay, so that's when we saw on our field work, what's it called where cities begin to change? They regenerate. So these factories then have been changed into cafes, for example. Beautiful, very expensive houses. We've had the increase in the universities around town. We've got the new BOA, the drama school, the Aston Engineering School. So big input into education, entertainment, places of interest for people to go, urban greening, that £11 million that Birmingham spent to that urban park outside Think Tank, an amazing area now. So we've got opportunities in Hicks. So why do people want to move and live in the city, like Birmingham, for example? What would make people move? So people will move to near the inner city because the housing is cheaper. The redevelopment, the regeneration of areas, attracting new business and investment. So there's great opportunities for different types of jobs now. We've got tourism. So lots of people will come to Birmingham. The amazing architecture of the new library and of Grand Central and the Bullring. Transport. So don't forget Birmingham's going to be the hub for HS2 around Curzon Street Station. So that can attract people living in London currently that could move to Birmingham where it's cheaper than London, but house prices are going to be growing within Birmingham, so that's a great opportunity for investment now. People can live in Birmingham and work in London, so they can have a good London wage, and then they can bring that back where they live in Birmingham and spend that in Birmingham, so that's helping investment in Birmingham. Challenges. Okay, so what problems has someone like Birmingham seen? So we talked about industrial decline. We've got areas then within the inner city where life expectancy is lower. Perhaps access to education is poorer. Healthcare, job opportunities, higher unemployment. Brownfield sites. So brownfield sites are where the factories have closed. Okay, so they're the derelict areas. Greenfield sites are the new sites to build on the edge of the city. That has problems as well. We'll come on into a moment. So let's move on. So we had a case study then, Birmingham, which I've talked about really. Then we've got, just making sure we're covering all the points, urban sprawl. Okay, so what's urban sprawl? So urban sprawl is that process where urban areas, the city has grown, the inner city, the suburbs, and you're starting to build, you're pushing out onto that green belt around the city. So the green belt around the city is really, really being pushed. It was an area to protect, to keep that green area of farming and countryside. But as cities have grown, it started to spill out onto that green belt land. So that's urban sprawl, spreading out into the countryside. And it doesn't need to happen, because remember, you've got those derelicts, those brownfield sites. That's what needs to be developed. We need to protect our countryside. But unfortunately, that's not always been happening. So you get commuter settlements. So commuter settlements are on that urban-rural fringe, so the urban sprawl. It means people can live right beyond Shirley, Henley and Arden. They can live in those areas because of transport being so good. They can then commute easily into the city. So they can. What you saw with Rio and Nigeria is people migrating into the city for all those opportunities. But what we see somewhere like Birmingham, actually, I don't want to live in the city centre of Birmingham with a family. I want to live on the lovely countryside on the outskirts. So I can do that because transport is so good. Then we've got sustainable urban living. So looking at the challenges, how can we make living in the urban area more sustainable? So that's using the urban area in a way that we're going to protect it and save it for future generations. So there's 3 things we can look at. Water conservation, well actually 4 things. Water conservation, how can we save water? Energy conservation, how can we save energy? Creating green spaces, and waste recycling. Okay, so how can we save water? You think of some ways that we can save water within our homes or within industry. Okay, so we can collect rainwater off our roofs in water butts and use that for washing our car and watering our plants. We can flush less. Remember, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. We can just use the water that we need in the kettle, take a shower, not a bath. We can have water meters put on our property so we can pay for exactly what we use, and we can also then make sure that we're not wasting water that we don't need. Energy conservation, how can we save energy in our homes? Solar panels on our roof. Can't really have a wind turbine in our garden, but they're things that we can move away from using fossil fuels. So we've got 2 things here. What can we do? And what do we want the government to do? So we want the government to invest in renewable energy. Energy efficient light bulbs. Just turn off your power. Don't leave things on standby. Creating green open spaces, that's protecting our parks. Not building on greenfield sites. We can not build on floodplains, so rivers need to flood onto the flat area next to them. Lots of new houses are built there, which is beyond me, so not build there. So we need to protect houses, look after our environment, let nature take its course sometimes, so not build on floodplains, and keep that as green space for us to enjoy as part of our healthy lives. And then waste recycling, reduce, reuse, recycle. So we can recycle more in our homes, use less plastic, think of alternatives, so you don't need cling film. You can use a plate, for example, on the top of dishes that you want to keep fresh in the fridge. We can not use carrier bags anymore, so that's a really excellent example. Bags for life instead. Then we're on to traffic management. So this is the last section here. So traffic. How can we manage traffic? So traffic congestion is a big problem. So can you think of ways that we can reduce traffic congestion in urban areas. So we've got better public transport. So be specific. You've got the A38, which goes through Edgbaston and into the city, which is a huge financial investment of Birmingham, where we're encouraging people to use cycle tracks. So if we cycle into the city, it's reducing the amount of cars going into the city. An investment in public transport, so trains, trams, for example, bus lanes. You've got the intelligent motorways. So again, the A38, as you go onto the M6, there's a lane there that is reducing or increasing the flow of traffic coming into the city during the morning, during rush hour. So that lane is open to come into the city. And then at rush hour, the other end of the day, the lane is open to take cars out of the city, so to increase the flow of traffic. Bus lanes, to encourage people to use a bus, so those lanes will be free-flowing. We've got ring roads around the city, so encourage people not to go in and through the city, but instead of around the city. I think that's perhaps enough there. So hopefully some of the main points and questions that you might get for section A. So look out then, section B coming shortly, which is the changing economic world. Okay.